Hello, friends, and happy Friday. Welcome back to the Friday Conversation, episode 103. Since we passed 100, it's easier for me to keep track of episode numbers now. Much easier. But anyway, so we're here today to discuss a few topics, one of them being Slipstream. And what is Slipstream? We'll find out. I'll find out because I don't know anything about Slipstream. So, Susanna, will you start us off with an introduction, please?
Hello, my name is Susana Imaginário, and I write Slipstream, or mythological Slipstream, slightly different. And I run a YouTube channel called Den of the Weird. Jose?
Paramita. Well, whoever.
Hello, everyone. I'm Paramita. I read a variety of books. Currently, my focus is mainly on literary fiction and classics, and I'm excited to find out more about Slipstream and talk a little bit about what I've read by looking up on Google.
And Jose.
Yeah, I'm Jose. I run the Jose's Amazing Worlds channel where I do book reviews, and recently I have cracking conversations with authors. And just to qualify Paramita's introduction, she doesn't read books, she reads all books.
Yes, I think the question isn't what books has she read, it's what books hasn't she read.
Go on, Paramita.
Yeah.
I don't know what to say. I have not read a lot of the books that show up on Slipstream lists. So that's a starting point.
Not yet.
True, not yet.
But you already completed your Goodreads challenge and everything. I mean, come on. Why bother setting a challenge anyway?
Yeah.
I don't know what to say. I like if it asks me to do something, I just do it.
That's not the best idea, but okay. Read 1,000 books this year. Okay, sure.
She's got no self-control, does she?
Well, I don't know. Maybe she does, because she does get through a ton of books. And that requires a bit of self-control, or is it the opposite? I don't know. But anyway.
Let's keep talking about her as if she wasn't here.
Yeah. Yeah, we do that all the time. Now she's here, so we have to behave.
Yeah.
Only good stuff, though. Only good stuff. So I guess we should start with, what is Slipstream?
Right. So according to the internet, because I didn't know this until way after I started writing. So it's a relative new term. I think it was only coined in 1989 as a genre. So it doesn't even have its own Amazon category. It was one of the things that I learned before publishing, that no agent would sign me when I was writing in a genre that doesn't even have its own Amazon category. So that was really motivating for me. And it's very niche, yes. And it's defined as a mix between fantasy, science fiction, and literary fiction. And yet I think to qualify it has to have those three elements, but it's more than just a combination of those genres. It's often described as a fiction of strangeness. And it's supposed to evoke a sense of weirdness in the reader. Not quite as the same way that weird fiction does. It's more like an intellectual workout with an emotional payoff, if that makes sense. You know, a direct path to human emotion rather than just or together with the narrative. I think Paramita in one of the forum posts, you describe it beautifully, that something as a magic realism for Anglophones, which I was laughing. So it makes sense in a very strange way, because magic realism is so ingrained in the culture and the Latin language as well. So when you try to translate that into English, I think what you get is Slipstream. I will try to explain this better later on. I have notes. It's not very good ones.
Oh,
So it
you
is
prepared?
supposed to make the reader feel weird, to make the reader think about what he's reading, and has an emotional payoff. So it's the sort of narrative that only actually pays off upon reread. You're supposed to be confused the first time, to have that feeling of what the fuck throughout, and then you only understand when you get to the end or when you read it again. So, does that help? No.
It's a pretty good start, yeah.
Like,
So
humor is yep.
no, please go ahead,
Go ahead.
Susanna. I can chime in later.
Okay, some of the key features is humor, or they usually appear like very dark humor, satire, wordplay, and there's a lot that it's inferred rather than described directly. It's kind of like in magic realism, where you try to describe the most banal things in a mystical ways, and then the more metaphysical stuff very realistically. Slipstream does that, but it's more subdued, so it's a bit more between the lines. You have to read the narrative as a whole. Again, it's complicated. It's not for everyone, I understand.
So one thing that I've been grappling with this definition in my mind, and I did not like what I found on the internet. I did not like, as in it was difficult for me to say that other than just write it down and reproduce it verbatim. But one thing that I've been doing sort of is one of my friends on Discord and we are reading this collection of stories by an Argentinian author, very famous author, George Luis Borges. And we have been doing one story a day. And this topic of the Friday conversation came up, and it was at the back of my mind. And then suddenly, while we were discussing a story, my friend used this phrase. He said, "It's interesting but uncomfortable." And to me, this is sort of encapsulates the feeling of reading a Slipstream work. And I genuinely say that in a very broad sense, because that also means that because interesting and uncomfortable are both such personal experiences, they are reader specific, that Slipstream almost automatically invites the reader into a collaborative effort with the creator of the work. And again, I'm using work very generally. It can be a film, it can be a song, it can be art, it can be literature, though today I think we will restrict ourselves to literature. The other thing that I was trying to coin, they say, do a one-line elevator pitch. I think it is a literature of disorientation. Fundamentally, this is counterintuitive, because at least me personally, I love murder mysteries. And one of the key features of murder mysteries, why people use murder mysteries in the same line as cozy, is because it gives you the answer. Why murder mysteries are cozy? Because on one end, we have something as horrifying as a murder occurring in a novel. And on the other side, people say that it's extremely cozy. I want a cozy murder mystery. What does that mean? It's not actually, because it gives you answers that in a way that life just doesn't. And and I love that. I mean, I love Agatha Christie is my all-time favorite author. Slipstream is the entire opposite. The definition is, as I said, it's disorientation. It does not give you answers. It gives you questions and possible answers, but even that, it's like, hey, like reader, if you want to go your own way with this, you go your own
The
way
answers
with
come.
Go on, please.
I have a note about that. So it gives you answers. It makes you think about it. It forces you to think. The answers come in hindsight, which is the most useless form of hindsight, if that makes sense. So it's the sort of story that ideally you'll be thinking about it for years to come and eventually remember bits here and there that you then can use. And you're right, it is supposed to involve the reader. I design my books purposely almost as puzzles. You really have to put the pieces together. If you don't, you get a nice, hopefully a nice entertaining story that it's a little bit vague and out there, but it's all right. But when you put the pieces together, that's when you hopefully go like, wow, I need to think about this for a while.
I also wanted to say one thing which helped me think about this a bit, just in terms of visualizing, is the term slipstream itself. So without even going into etymology, just phonetically, slipstream, it has this element of elusiveness in it. No, it's almost something that you are trying to grasp, someone is trying to grasp something tangible and it is eluding you. And that is not for want of effort or not anything that you are doing wrong, nor that the creator is doing anything wrong. It is just that element of elusiveness is ingrained in the work itself. It is a feature of the work. And as Susanna already said, it's designed to make you think. And there is no limit on how much you can think or how long you can think for it. And indeed, you can choose to reject it outright. You can choose to reject this collaboration and say, this invitation to collaborate with the creator of the work and say, I don't want to think, which I have done with works of Slipstream. But when it does, when it clicks, as I said, it's a very personal thing. So what I like as a good example of Slipstream literature will be different to what Susanna says, will be different to what Steve says, will be different to what Jose says, and will be different to for all the listeners. We will find some commonalities, but it is very, very personal. So, I mean, that's quite interesting to me in of itself. But also to go into the etymology, if you think of slipstream, I mean, there's this element of fluidity. It's almost something that if you think about something flowing, it is not something that one can grasp tangibly without realizing to some extent that I have to let this go. And it's sort of, I won't call it surrender, but I would say there is an acceptance required at some level, however superficially, that I'm not going to know everything, and that's okay. If one can sort of approach any slipstream work like this, it might lead to a more rewarding experience even on the first read. Otherwise, in my experience, the most natural reaction is frustration. Like, just tell me what you want to tell me. But the author, usually, if they are in control of the narrative and if they are in control of what they are doing, it is not that they don't know what they want to say. It is that they don't want to tell you right away. They have, for example, they have an idea, a thought experiment, a what if. And the answer to that what if, yes, they have a particular theory, but they don't want that to be the only theory. That's not the reason why they are putting out this work. Part of it is wanting the reader to come up with their own thoughts and maybe even reject the theory when they share their views at the end. The other thing I think slipstream literature is immensely, it lends itself to discussion, to collaborative discussion. And I think we had one on the forum, in fact, It was The House Taken Over, by the short story by Julio Cortázar. So I would say a lot of his stories, he's more fabulist than what Borges does, but I would say he would qualify, at least some of his work would qualify as slipstream literature. But I mean, again, these are all labels, and I'm keen to hear what others think.
So slipstream outside literature is defined, I have it here, as an assisting force drawing something along behind something else. So another definition, Google is my friend, a current of air or water driven back by a revolving propeller or a jet engine. So but I do prefer the assisting force regarded as drawing something along behind something else. So there's always a meaning. There's a story, and there's the story that's behind the text. And to read it properly, you need to be able to abstract, to read between the lines, to listen to the words as much as interpret their meaning. And that's why anyone who tries to read Slipstream literally will not get it. Just if they can't abstract, they will not be able to get it. And I noticed this with terrible consequences. You'll be like a colorblind person trying to fully appreciate a rainbow. You will never understand. You mentioned House Taken Over. That's where I would not qualify at Slipstream. It's magic realism, because that is the difference between the two, in my opinion. Magic realism focused on fiction, just fiction, maybe a little bit of fantasy. It usually doesn't have the sci-fi elements, or if it does, if it has sci-fi elements, it doesn't have fantasy elements. And to be Slipstream has to have the whole tree, and a setting that it's usually in itself a little bit out there, a little bit of a sort of a dreamscape. Nothing that it's grounded in reality to begin with, or at least part of the book has to be happen somewhere else. Crickets.
When we, like now it's such a, it's a fairly broad label. So I'm trying to think of, and I would request Jose and Steve to please join in, because you read a lot of different books. Are there any books which make you feel disoriented when you first get into them, and then it sort of all comes together? Are there books where you feel disoriented and it doesn't come together and you still like the experience? Just sort of trying to get a feel of how we may not know whether it's Slipstream or not. That is coming maybe later, because I don't know certainly whether what I'm reading is Slipstream or not. But are there books which invoke that feeling of disorientation for you in a positive way?
Jose, go ahead.
Oh God, I think this sounds like a lot of effort and mental gymnastics, and
yes,
I think Susanna has mentioned that you're gonna have fantasy, sci-fi, and general weirdness, and not knowing where you are, and the emotional payoff and effort. And for some reason, we've ended up talking about magic realism that, to me, has got nothing to do with it, because magic realism, the way I understand that, has got no sci-fi, no fantasy. It really, they're two completely different.
Yeah, that's why
things,
the difference. It has fantasy sometimes, a little bit.
Yeah, I think from what I've read, and I haven't read as much as many people here, but magic realism, I straight away go to, and we were talking before going live, 100 Years of Solitude by Gabriel García Márquez. And that has got zero fantasy, that has got zero sci-fi. It's just not that thing. So I don't think I've read anything Slipstream other than Susanna's works. And then in answer to Paramita's question, yes, I've read not books but short stories that had made me wonder. I think Carver's short stories and Chekhov's short stories have got that sort of, unease. What's going on? We discussed Cortázar's House Taken Over, but they're not Slipstream either. They don't have those elements that Susanna has mentioned. I think from what I read in the little preparation I did for the episode today, Slipstream is kind of something that, 1989 is just too far out there. It's whatever wasn't sci-fi, whatever, it's way out there, and it's like not. I don't know. It seems like a catch-all term for things that don't fit into the existing categories.
Yeah. Exactly.
And I think there's very little of that unless you want to retroactively rebrand things as Slipstream. But yeah, I've read stories that have made me uneasy, not because they were horror, but because of, thematically what they were trying to do. You're wondering what's going on, and you don't get an answer, and you are left feeling a little bit still in the dark as to what's actually happening. But they know Slipstream, as per the definition that Susanna has presented today.
Mm-hmm. No, it is true. It's been used a lot like that when it doesn't fit in fantasy or science fiction or science fantasy, and it has then literary elements to it. It's then people don't know where to put it. It's not horror. It's not romance. It's not anything. It just goes into Slipstream. And so fair enough. There's very few people writing or claiming to write Slipstream. I myself, in a normal conversation, I would say fantasy, because fantasy to me englobes, it covers everything that it's, fantastical. It's just easier than try to explain.
From the little bit of searching I've done as a few minutes before we were live, the term Slipstream sounds like it was coined in 1989, but it sounds like it's been a thing for a long time. When I hear the definition, it sounds a lot like weird fiction, but we have some. It sounds a little bit more grounded and not as weird fiction, but more of a speculative fiction. And for me, the first thing that came to my mind is the older science fiction, the kind of vague older science fiction that I remember reading when I was younger, from the 60s or 70s. It kind of, so I start to wonder, are so many subgenres a good or bad thing? I guess it's good for a reader who knows what they're getting into, because if you write Slipstream and somebody reads it literally, they won't get it because they'll read it literally. So it does set a reader up, or kind of lets the author market to the right audience, so people who are fans of it. But I wonder how many subgenres are too many subgenres, and does that make it harder as a writer and a reader to find what you're looking for? Whether you're a reader looking for a book, does it narrow things down too far that? And again, the definitions kind of are different for everyone, so it doesn't make it harder for you to market your books to the right audience. And does it make it easier for a reader to find the book that they're looking for?
By putting the label on, it definitely helps the reader who is looking for Slipstream to find it. It's helpful. For the author, it's just you're going to have to market as fantasy or mythology. I mean, that's what I do. Usually people who love mythology, they will enjoy the book because they already have they like fantasy, they like mythology, then they already have that ability to abstract. Otherwise, they wouldn't like mythology, because mythology is way out there. I think it's the original Slipstream, especially Greek mythology. So until it becomes more popular, I think it's the way to go. But as a reader, I would love to have a category and just go and search directly whenever I wanted to, have a little bit of a workout, just read read a puzzle. That's kind of how I define it sometimes when I'm writing is, does the puzzle fit? I'm always looking for that sort of books, and I found a few, very, very few. They exist, but they are usually marketed as either fantasy or science fiction.
Sounds like a lot of boxes to check off. It sounds like there's a lot to make it something qualify. But again, I guess the definition changes, but it sounds like a lot of boxes to check for it to be Slipstream.
One book that first of all, to answer your question, Steve, no, it didn't really help me, because when I started looking for Slipstream, I was like, but this is literary fiction. But this is science fiction. But this is fantasy. Like, it did not help me additionally. Like, the titles that I identified, which showed up on Slipstream lists, like just from Google, I did not do any very deep dive. But I've read the ones that I read before, I had read in a different context, and it didn't help me very additionally to know that they qualify under this. And if you give any search, automated search, that is, algorithm, forget Goodreads, but even if you give something like Reddit or one of those, literature map or things like that, if you give them 3 Slipstream books, it will not give you a 4th one which you want to read. It will go by author or by the genre, as Susanna and you like, fantasy, or if it's sci-fi, then sci-fi. Like, it will go by that instead of understanding that these 3 have this in common and show you another one from the 4th list, at least in my experience. So for me personally, it was not helpful when I searched. But I was going to say, one book which shows up on all the Slipstream lists that I have seen on the internet is Cloud Atlas by David Mitchell. And I did not like this book at all. I mean, it was
the movie is better.
Oh my god! Can we say that as bookworms?
Yes, and I stand by it. It is my favorite movie of all time, and I will rant about it in a bit. Yeah. Paramita, just friendship is over.
I'm happy to rant about the book, but I don't want to. I mean, I didn't get it. Like, I'll be honest. It's exactly what Susanna said in the book. I don't know whether I read it literally, but somebody told me after I said I didn't get it. Somebody told me, Paramita, here's the structure. There's this particular structure to the book, and they told me the structure. I was like, okay, now they've told me the answer, so now I should go big. And I still didn't get it. I was like, why? Why? I mean, I guess yes.
Because it's fun. It's fun. It's exhilarating.
Made me want to cry. See, this is the hey, maybe we can add this as a feature to Slipstream literature. It's incredibly polarizing. Like, somebody's going to say, I love it so much, and somebody's going to be like, it made me want to cry. Oh, well, this is a sample size of 2, but I mean, has anybody else seen the Cloud Atlas film or read the book?
I'll say.
Okay, so Susanna.
No, I haven't read the book, but I did watch the movie, and I thought it was. I liked it a lot. I wondered why it failed at the box office the way it did.
You liked it a lot. Oh dear, I'm losing 2-1.
Well, I don't know if I'd say I liked it a lot. It's been a while, but I remember liking it. I don't know if I liked it a lot, but I remember liking it. I remember wondering, like I said, what, because a lot of, I think there's Tom Hanks and Halle Berry and a bunch of people in that film.
Great cast.
But it did strike me as something that most people wouldn't like, just because of the It was a different type of storytelling, I guess you could say. So I got why it wasn't as popular, because of the way the story unfolded, and kind of jumps different places, and it's kind of confusing. But I remember liking it.
Ah. So Steve, do you remember? I mean, I'm purposely not asking Susanna because I mean she knows, but do you remember if the story went like, how do I say this? Like, does it go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1? So 5
In
plot
the
lines,
books,
and then
kind of, yeah. The book, the stories are just divided in two, and which makes it very easy. The movie, it's better because they are all mixed. They are connected. Not,
they mixed it up.
yeah, they even mixed the
I
actors,
would be
made
so
it play
confused by
different
that
roles.
movie.
It's beautiful, beautiful. So it's a masterpiece. The book is simple in comparison.
And imagine I did not get the book. What will happen to me if I try to watch the movie?
But you see, the thing about the book, and it's reflected in the movie as well, it's not just because the stories are divided, but because they are written in different genres within the same book, with just one thread connecting them. That's the literary aspect. And then you does that make sense? Jose, you read the book or watched the movie? What are your thoughts? You're muted. You're still muted.
Sorry. No, I read the book and I enjoyed it. It was I really enjoyed the sort of peeling the onion type thing, and that sort of wondering where this is all going, and not necessarily getting the answers to it, which kind of fits into your definition. So I found interesting the narrative structure. I found, each story in itself was interesting, but then, you sort of fall in deeper and deeper. I think I just wonder how much is a attention grabbing exercise. Look what I can do, and if it's a little bit gimmicky.
Yes,
And
yes,
how
I
much.
felt this.
So I
I
think
felt this so much.
if you're there first, like Cloud Atlas, I enjoy it. Would the one that everyone raves about that I didn't get, House of Leaves, is that also Slipstream? Because I didn't get that at all.
I've seen that
So
on lists, yes.
yeah. I mean, everyone's read that book at some point, and some people love it. I did not. I didn't hate it. I just didn't get the.
I gave up after 10. I gave up after 10% of the book. So
And
it's
then,
like, I'm not doing this.
but
Life is too short.
the next person that you cannot write another book like House of Leaves, because the next person that does it, you're going to go, oh, they're copying. Is it? I can remember the surname. It sounds Polish, but the author. And the next person that tries to do something like Cloud Atlas is like, oh, they are copying. So I don't know. What's the next thing? A book that opens up like a map type thing? I don't know. You have to get creative with the narrative structure. And I don't know if he falls into the gimmicky bit or not. Another book that maybe some of you haven't read is it's called S, or also
Oh,
called
yes, J.J. Abrams.
J.J.
Yes,
Abrams, The Ship of Theseus,
yes.
where you got a story in the book, and then kind of handwritten on the margins, you got another story. So you got the story within the story, and the book itself has got like a little napkin that falls off with annotations there, and then it all goes a little bit meta because there's puzzles within the story that you try. So it works on 3 levels: the story that you read, the story of 2 students that communicate by writing on the margins of the page, and then it can engage you as a reader by trying to solve the puzzles that you encounter in the book. But again, no one can do that again. It's done. So I enjoy them. Don't get me wrong. Except for House of Leaves, I enjoy the other 2. But it's done. The gimmick is done. How do you move on from there?
I don't know, but
One thing
I've
that
never heard
just
of that
noticed,
book, but I wanted it. I need it right now. It looks beautiful. Okay.
One thing that I wanted to say, which is sort of related, which Jose pointed out right now. House of Leaves and S are both examples of something called ergodic literature, which Do Unicorns Read has made a video about. And that basically means that you actually physically interacting with the text of the novel is part of the reading experience.
Yeah.
House of Leaves, it's very obvious. And the difference with Slipstream, which is not there in ergodic literature, is it has to be text only. So what is there in House of Leaves, the formatting, there's some parts are small, some parts, if you have the colored remastered version, then some parts are different color. Same thing with S, as Jose said, you have things in the margins, the notes, the handwritten notes, then they're writing things to each other, all these things. Cloud Atlas is not. Cloud Atlas is text only. So whatever has to be achieved only through words. It can be non-linear narrative, it can be all those things, but it has to be achieved only through words. The physicality of the act of reading is not a part of the experience necessarily of Slipstream. It's psychological, I think. So that's probably why House of Leaves and S would. I mean, of course, you can count them. I mean, it's a very broad umbrella term. As Jose said, it could also be just like, and even Susanna said that, it was maybe just as 1989, hey, we don't know how to label this, let's just put this in Slipstream. But it's like the much one-line thing is that you can read Cloud Atlas as an ebook. You probably shouldn't with House of Leaves and S. I don't think an ebook exists for S or House of Leaves, at least as far as I know. And you definitely can't do them on audio. Cloud Atlas, I think an audiobook exists. I think.
Yeah, exactly.
And I think it exists as an ebook. I didn't get Cloud Atlas. I still don't get it.
Sorry.
Let me find... But let me find the second title, which is on this erstwhile list, because I think this might be fun. It's also one which was made into a movie. It's Annihilation by Jeff Vandermeer. Has anyone seen the film or read the book?
That is weird fiction.
It is weird fiction. I always thought it was weird fiction. But now it shows up on Slipstream. I mean, well, these are internet curated lists. So it is what it is. If it is Slipstream, I love it. I mean, this is my kind of Slipstream then, because Annihilation is in one of my top 3. I thought it was science fiction and then, weird fiction, but it's in my top 3 science fiction books of all time. It's brilliant, according to me. Now, I'm waiting to hear from someone who hated the movie or the book.
Well, I'm reading the book now. I'm halfway through.
Please tell me you like it, Steve.
I love it. And
yes!
The movie was okay.
Yes. I mean, the Purple Bookworm who is on the forum will be very happy because this is like her favorite science fiction trilogy. And yeah, she has thoughts about the movie.
Yeah.
Yes.
But just there is no audiobook or ebook for S or House of Leaves, thankfully.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm not sure how that would work.
And S is half off right now on Amazon.
But get the
not on Amazon UK.
Don't get the paperback.
There's only a hardcover available.
Yeah.
And it's pricey, but I've had it to my wish list. I can't buy it right now. I'm broke, but I've had it for all it's worth.
I love House of Leaves. I know it's one of those like love or hate things, but
yes,
it's weird because you read it, and if you go by, because usually I think most of us go by how many pages did I read today, but you can spend an hour and a half reading and read like 10 pages in the book because you're jumping back and forth to the appendices and to footnotes and articles, and you jump everywhere. So it's a whole different. It really throws you off from your the way you normally absorb literature. But it is not for everyone.
Yeah. Do you think, I mean, I would like to try it once, but I think somebody would have to tell me, Paramita, stop getting in, I want story and just go with what the author is doing. Like I would need somebody to buddy read or something with me. But I wanted to ask Steve, do you think that the author knew what he was doing, or was it more like, this just came to me? Like, was it inspiration or was it calculated? Like for you when you read the book?
Oh, it had to be planned, because there's so many different things. There's like coded letters, and there's hidden messages, and there's the way the stories all intertwine between the two different timelines, and all the footnotes and the appendices and the articles and the descriptions of, it's the amount of time and work that went into that must have taken him years to do it.
Wow.
It's really amazing. I mean, it's not for everyone. No, I know some people just won't like it. That's fine. But if you can give it a try, like I wanted to read it again. I just haven't had a chance, but it's it's an experience for sure.
Yeah, you're nearly empty TBR means we can start tomorrow.
Yeah.
Jose, I wanted to ask you the same question. When you read S, did you feel like it was planned, or was it more like, if we go by the very familiar architect versus gardener approach, was it very, very architect, or were there bits of gardener in it?
No, I think these things have to be very carefully planned. There's no chance that something like S or House of Leaves are not planned. You're gonna put, or maybe you can write it in parts. Like something like S, you could write the main narrative, and then add on later at different places the second narrative. But the whole thing is planned. It's got to be. It's just too complicated a job to not be carefully thought out.
Nice.
So is House of Leaves Slipstream?
It's not on my internet curated list, which is clearly the definitive answer to everything.
No, it's a whole different thing. Yeah.
With the Siberiad, which is one I've not read, so I don't know anything about it. But Stanislaw Lem, I can believe, because like his other books, I've read two of his books. One is Solaris, which is truly alien. It is alien species done as they ought to be written. If I want to quote a very well-known and possibly beloved author of ours. So that's one book. And then the other book which I read was so weird. It was something straight out of Kafka. One of my friends recommended it, and I was like, what the hell is it? It's called Memoirs Found in a Bathtub. So Stanislaw Lem goes very weird, and that literature of disorientation aspect is certainly there. But I haven't read the Siberiad. What else is here? Yes, Borges has shown up. I knew it. The Aleph and Other Stories. So Borges is one of these authors he's a part of, literature. He's a part of our cultural consciousness. But I also think that one thing where he sort of, he wrote only a short form. So he wrote short stories and he wrote essays and stuff. So he didn't write any novels. And this was actually something, because for me, when I read Borges, when I read his stories, that is the closest I get to feeling what I said, interesting but uncomfortable. Like, where are you going with this? I don't get it. But it's a short story, so that discomfort doesn't last long enough for me to get completely alienated. One thing is, I was wondering is, how difficult is it to maintain? And now we can bring in magical realism, or we can bring in weird fiction as well. How difficult is it to maintain that sense of interest while not alienating the reader in a short story versus a novella versus a novel? So Boris wrote a short story, and there I think he's really the master. I mean, he's immaculate. But a Slipstream novel, I mean, the one I found, Cloud Atlas, was just. So is it hard to sustain? Like, I'm talking about readers like me, maybe. Where I'm like, tell me what's going on. Do you think the attention thing it might be a factor?
Absolutely. If your mind is not geared, I mean, if you don't like what you're reading, like for example, when we talk about Slipstream a while back, Jenny Wirtz recommended Light by John Harrison, which I've never heard of, so I went and got the book.
Yes.
And yeah, definitely Slipstream. But I didn't like it because for me, Slipstream is about the themes that I liked in a Slipstream novel. Let's put it this way: it's anything that it's related to the soul or being human, the mind, free will, creation, all those metaphysical stuff. And he was just it was just the one theme. He was to focus on sexual frustration and perversion. I'm going to say it because and it started very well, and well in a sense I was feeling like it was almost like this sense of aversion to the book, but I was invested in the story because it had all those elements. It was those super out there and trying to figure it out how the puzzles came together. But it very quickly, that intense emotion of, oh my God, this is really weird and really icky, and just this character is just awful. It just wore me down because it was the same thing. Every character had that issue, that drive behind them. It wasn't about finding the meaning of anything. It was just solving their own repressed sexualities. And so even though the prose was great, it carried the story through to just through skill. It just story-wise, it break through. I mean, it break down. I'm sorry. There were bits in story there that I couldn't figure it out. Maybe I'm just stupid, but I had the impression that they were just there to shock or, ain't this idea great? I'm putting it here because this is all crazy anyway. It doesn't need to fix to kind of fit together. And maybe it will be, I think it's a trilogy, so maybe it'll be explained in later books. I don't know. So yeah, just because it's my thing doesn't mean I'm going to like every book in it. And that one failed because it was just the one note constantly. And it needs to be a bit more varied.
Yeah, I mean, very interesting because I liked Light.
You
and
liked
I'm usually
Light?
Very, very. I really liked it.
How?
See, right? I know. It's so weird because I should be theoretically creeped, and I was. I was like, what the hell are you doing? Chill. But his ideas were good. I mean, they were very good. I would say they were very good. I mean, one of the key things which he did, which I liked a lot, is Schrodinger's cat, which is this. It's projected as a fallacy of quantum mechanics because he's like, so you have a cat and it's in a box, and until you open the box, you don't know whether it's alive or dead. So how can a macroscopic object be simultaneously alive or dead? And it's a fallacy because quantum mechanics applies to microscopic objects. So obviously when you go to a macroscopic level, just apply it directly, it breaks down. Quantum mechanics doesn't break down, the applicability breaks down. So that's the fallacy. And he actually went right in with this trope head on. I mean, it is Schrodinger's cat experiment in action in a far future setting. And I was very, very enamored by that. But the next two books, there was none of that.
Oh, you read them? Huh? Yeah.
Yes. Nova Swing and Empty Space. To answer your question, Susanna, no, I didn't get any answers. And the creepy things got creepier. So I just was creeped out.
Okay.
I like the name of the series though, Kefa Huchit. It's a very, very cool conceptually. And I think I agree with Jose a lot, where he said how much of it is the author pulling off this intellectual gimmick because it's cool and it's fun in order to appeal to a readership. I mean, storytelling in general, whenever we are doing any form of storytelling, whether it's oral or written, it assumes that somebody is listening. So it's not a solitary act. Of course, if the author did this as an intellectual experiment and kept it in their private journal, then it's their business. It's none of ours. But the moment it's put out in the form of a book, I think it assumes that readers will want to read it and hopefully get something out of it. So there, yeah, I'm not too sure how far this pure intellectual experiment, what can we do with words, how far that can go without, as Susanna mentioned, theming related to something which a reader can connect to.
Yeah, for me in that case I didn't connect to the characters.
Oh yeah, me neither. It was just that one cool idea where I was like, oh, nice, you did this. Other than that, yeah, despicable characters. If anybody connects to them, I'd be like, okay, gulp. What was I going to say? I wanted to ask a bit about the two cousins of Slipstream, since one is magical realism, which is going to come in at some point. And I was wondering if maybe Jose could tell us a bit about how he got introduced, or tell us just a little bit about magical realism, because I'll be honest, I still don't know what magical realism is properly and how it differs from fantasy.
Me? You expected me to be able to? I don't know. I mean, I fell into Gabriel García Márquez because at school one of his shorter books was required reading 1 year. But it was one of his journalistic books. It was the tale of a seaman that falls off a boat and he stays at sea for like a Colombian seaman in the 80s, and he falls at sea, and eventually he gets rescued, and then Garcia Marquez sort of retold his story and published the book. Can't remember what it's called in English. But anyway, so then obviously from there I heard about 100 Years of Solitude. My grandmother bought it for me, and then I read it, but I was quite young. I got a little bit lost. And then from that I carried on with Loving the Time of the Cholera, which I loved, but you've already said it's not quite magic realism. So I don't know. I not so much anymore these days, but up until 10 years ago, my reading palette was a lot wider than it is now. And for us, I don't know, Susanna, but for us in Spanish-speaking people, all the South American and Spanish classics are sort of required reading, part of the culture. Borges, Cortázar, the Spanish classics from the 17th century. I've read them all, and then José Saramago. I've read, I think, a couple of his books as well. So it's just, for me, it's part of my culture. Possibly, for Steve or, I don't know, Paramita, because you seem to read everything, but maybe for British or North American culture, the Spanish language classics are not so well known.
Marquez is, the English translation, Marquez is very, very beloved here where I live. In both the local bookstores, there is one shelf full of Marquez titles. So it's. I think, despite the differences in the specifics of history, there are so many things which are relatable. For example, in my mother tongue, Bengali, family sagas are a huge thing, and there are what we would call magical realism elements in them very strongly. Particularly when we are going to descriptions of nature, or particularly when some cataclysmic event is about to happen. It's a very, very, it's used in a different way. So I would not call it magical realism, but yes, it has that familiarity. And so naturally, I think we gravitate towards this literature, this rich body of literature, and it strikes home, which is why there's this continued love for Marquez, at least where I live.
Right. What about you, Steve?
Yeah, I don't know. There's whole shelves or sections dedicated, but they're appreciated. I think they're somewhat well known. Certain circles they are, but I think sadly, I think most readers are reading like romance or cozy, the easily digestible stuff. Sadly, there's nothing wrong with romance.
Nothing.
No.
Absolutely not.
Yeah.
Love in the Time of Cholera has elements of, we can say, very, very, well, I don't know whether I would call it romance, but it's about, it's definitely about what it is in the title. It's about love, and it's about different manifestations. It's a very, very powerful book, like that. So all those elements are there. I don't think I would call it cozy, but there are some very beautiful scenes in Love in the Time of Cholera. But I guess it's like, I didn't know this until somebody who knew told me. It's also all these historical things woven in. So it's not just the story itself, but it's all these other things that are there in the background, sort of mapped out in a very, which holds meaning to readers. But I didn't get that because I didn't know. Maybe if I looked it up, I would have appreciated it better. But somebody told me later on, and they told me the same thing with 100 Years of Solitude. I was like, this is. It at some points it gets a bit disorienting in the story, 100 Years of Solitude. But then one of my friends who has read the book and who knew the history told me about what was being done, the Colombian, this microcosm of what the nation is encapsulated, or parts of the history of the nation encapsulated in one book with a family saga. It was beautiful, and that opening line, my God.
Two things. So one on the magic realism. So Paulo Coelho, would it be magical realism? The Alchemist.
I really like that book, but I don't know whether it is. I mean, the problem is that I don't know, because the literati look down upon that book, and magical realism is very much dominated by the literati. So by literati, I just mean literary fiction people.
Yeah.
And they would be like, The Alchemist is, because it was a popular bestseller, and they're like, this is just a self-help book, and so blah, blah, blah. And I really liked Alchemist both times I read it. I will admit that this is many, many years ago. I also liked many of his other books. I read, Paulo Coelho was very, very popular at one time. So he had multiple of his books. I think there's one called Devil and Miss Prim, or Devil, yeah. So that was another book I really liked. There was one with the mountain, something like this. So that's another. Quite a few titles. I think this qualifies, definitely.
I'm just going to drop something and then quickly move the conversation on, so you don't make me explain the situation. But I did end up once discussing The Alchemist with a hooker in Amsterdam. But anyway, so we are sort of almost 1 hour into the chat. Could we come up like with I always end up writing like lists of books and stuff whenever we have chats. So like, can we come up with like 5 Slipstream books that, like, for someone interested or delve deeper in? I mean, obviously, apart from Susanna's books. So we've talked about Cloud Atlas. Did we reckon House of Leaves? Do we count that in as well?
No, probably not. Light, yes. Light by M. John Harrison, yes.
Okay.
I would say Borges, yes. No, probably not.
I would disagree with Borges, actually.
Fair enough.
Where's the fantasy and the sci-fi?
I mean, that's the thing. For my definition, those don't have to be. And if you think about the thought experiments, like, yes, if you say fantasy is secondary world, yes, no, it's not there. But if you think of fantasy as, again, imagination, what could be, thought experiments, then Library of Babel is possibly fantasy. It could be. Garden of Forking Paths has elements of sci-fi because the definition of the forking path includes multiple timelines, parallel universes, those sort of things. So it's sort of baked in, but he never goes very explicit on it in the way that we would identify it. Would be my thing. But
So we've only got 2 books then.
Well, I'm going to read other titles. One I will definitely say yes is Ice by Anna Kavan. It is a brilliant book. It's a very creepy book, but I mean, it's not creepy, it's disorienting. It's this, not time, not, setting is not mentioned, but it's post-apocalyptic. Everything has gone to hell, nuclear waste, cold winter, blah, blah. And this person is pursuing this girl. And is it fever dream? What is real? What is not? Nobody knows. Is it science fiction? Is it dystopian? It's a bizarre book. And yes, I think Ice by Anna Kavan is like a book which, even if you ignore the Slipstream label, just as science fiction, it's very, very good.
Add it to my list. Okay.
And also it's published by Penguin Classics, which has penguin in it. So we know that's how we know it's good.
Right. So I was kind of prepared for a question like this. And after struggling to find, apart from Cloud Atlas, Light, Annihilation, I will include Annihilation on it because it has elements and it has more elements than the books that I picked, to be fair. So I picked a few books that have, I would call it almost like Slipstream light. They have Slipstream elements into it, even though they are mainly either fantasy or science fiction. But I can see some of the elements there. And Paramita, you're gonna, I don't know, maybe you will agree, I don't know, but you're gonna hate my first suggestion, I know. So one of them is Hyperion, which is mainly science fiction, but because it is several stories in different genres with a common theme throughout, and they have, all the, I think it's one of my favorite books of all time. Again, just sorry, Paramita, and it's what it is. So it has the literary elements, the science fiction elements, and the fantasy elements, and so it is, in a way, it requires a little bit of work to understand what's going on. And it's awesome when you get to the end and you figure it out. So you're going to scream because you hated the book?
No, I finished crying. And I really like 2 of the stories out of the 7. So I really like the Scholar's Tale and the Poet's Tale. So, yes.
So yeah, there's always something to like. Anyway, the other one, I don't know if you read, but I can imagine. So it's The Reality Dysfunction by Peter F. Hamilton. Again, it's space opera, science fiction, but it has elements of Slipstream to it. It doesn't cross the literary tick, let's put it this way, but a lot of what's going on there, it gets really weird. I mean, even ghosts have ghosts. It's I have to read it again because it's just immense. I wouldn't classify it as Slipstream, but it does require a little bit of attention and work to read it, if nothing else, because it's so long and so out there. So yeah, so for those who like science fiction, I would recommend that. In the realms of magic realism, I would recommend Balthazar and Blimunda. It kind of ticks all the boxes, but it's kind of an hybrid between magic realism and Slipstream. because it has a bit of the fantastical elements, but it's still very grounded in I want to say structure, but the mindset of magic realism, which I think you didn't like that one either. So it's going great.
I really liked the beginning, and then I lost my way. I really liked the first 20%. And the opening is just, I was really clicking with the humor. And then I don't, again, I wondered whether this is where I'm missing context, whether that's historical or
Maybe
something else, because I didn't look anything up when I read it.
Yeah, it's very good. The mindset. I found it harder. I read it. I got it in English and started reading it, and I found it much harder to read in English. Because I really need to read it with the Portuguese mindset, if that makes sense, to make sense of the book. It's so yeah. It's not easy, I guess, to recommend. Yeah, you should read it with the Portuguese mindset. So those were my 3 recommendations. Yep.
I want to go back to something Paramita asked before. So what books have you, Steve and Susanna, have you read that has made you feel uneasy or uncomfortable or like not knowing quite what's going on?
Malazan?
With
yeah. It made me feel, just.
But for different reasons. For different reasons. Not because of what we're discussing
today. For me,
today.
Anything, a recent read is anything by Kafka. I read The Castle by Kafka, and I have no idea what was going on. I was like, I read The Trial, which is, I would say, easier in the sense it's a take on bureaucracy, and it can be read as such. But his complete stories, and then The Castles, some of his complete stories were just, I was like, what? And then, I mean, this is I don't know what the answer to this is, but does there have to be a point, or can it just be weird? And for me, it just cannot. I mean, I'm not the reader for that. Like, if it's just weird without some theming, and if I'm not getting the theming, which is much more likely, I feel so uneasy that I don't know what to do. I get frustrated. The Kafka is my answer, actually, but I'm interested to hear what Susanna and Steve come up with. Malazan, I was like that even at the end of book 10, Steve. It's not my proudest moment.
You're not alone.
Oh.
Looking through my list now. Go ahead, Susanna.
Well, not many. I have to say, like properly weird. To come to mind, one recently. I wouldn't say bad weird, but it made me want to understand it better. I really enjoyed in a way was the Tiger, or the Stars My Destination that we read for the sci-fi masterworks. It's but it was more in the sense that I knew that I really should hate that character, and I should hate everything going on, and I didn't. But there was one bit that I was very uncomfortable reading. Just if this is going to continue this way, I'm going to stop, because my brain just can't deal with. And another book that has nothing to do with Slipstream, but it made me feel it had that sense of weirdness throughout, even though it's not classified as weird fiction at all. I don't know how it is classified. It was Equinox. I can't remember the name of the author. But I think that was the closest I felt, even though I don't think it's a horror book either, but it was the closest I felt to a book that had an atmosphere, for lack of a better description. But it still didn't answer the question. I will need to go through the list, find books that make me feel weird. The Reality Dysfunction made me feel very weird, mostly because I had no idea what was going on for most of the time. Steve?
Looking through my list, couple of them that would the only good Indians be? I don't know. There's fantasy or sci-fi.
Yes, I read that recently.
Uh,
Steve, I didn't get it. What was that?
I don't know. That's why I'm bringing it up. Another one, which is a graphic novel, is Nameless. I don't know, by Grant Morrison. Not sure if anyone's read that. I think that would probably fit the bill for Slipstream.
Grant Morrison, you're gonna get weirdness with Grant Morrison. That's what he does.
A book that I despised is Things Have Gotten Worse Since We Last Spoke. That maybe. I don't know. Maybe just because I hated it so much. Let's see what else. I was looking through. Another one that stuck out to me was, where was it? Sorry, this is riveting podcast material. The Hay Bale by Priscilla Bettis. It's a novelette. It's only 42 pages long, but it's a powerful story. But I'm not quite sure I understood it, and I'm not quite. It's one of those ones where you wonder if it's left vague, just so you can kind of draw your own conclusions on what it all meant. And is that Slipstream?
I've never heard of.
I still don't know what Slipstream is, so I'll say sure.
Another one, Negative Space, which is
anything.
excellent.
It's pretty much anything you don't like, except light.
Oh, yeah.
But I mean, I like Boris. I read that Only Good Indians. I mean, this is a bit of that since Steve mentioned it, and I really wanted to like it. The beginning was so good, and then I don't even want to say, because my friend who recommended me this was scandalized by what I said. I was bored, and they were like, how can you be bored? Like, that is the worst thing. You say you hated it, that is different. But I was like, no, I don't hate it at all. I was just bored. They're like, you did not get it. And I was like, yes, I did not get it. But I heard that there was some very good theming in there. So, I mean, Stephen Graham Jones is an author in general who I think is one to look out for. Him and another author who is on my radar, but his books are very hard to find, is Michael Sisko. So he writes these books. I think it's weird fiction. It's not Slipstream, but it's related. So he's got Divinity Student, and he's got this book called Animal Money, and it's bizarre out there stuff. Steve is like, I'm going to schedule a read along right now. I totally feel like you would like it. I don't know about, I'm not sure about Susanna and Jose so much. Divinity Student, you might like, but Animal Money, I started it and I was like, I can't do this. It's 800 pages and I was like, I can't do
it. If anyone can.
Michael Sisko's, he's very, I didn't mean to pause, it sounded bad. He's a very nice person. He's very intelligent, and and his wife is a very skilled writer as well. Farrah Rose Smith.
Oh. I just found a book which made me so uncomfortable. I don't know what to say. This is honestly a book I would say, anybody, please don't read it. I beg you.
Okay.
The book actually showed up on a Slipstream list. The science fiction author Christopher Priest, he made a list of 10 Slipstream books, and this was on it. It's Crash by J.G. Ballard. It is one of the most revolting things I have read in my life. Why?
Yeah, I would call it. It misses the other elements. Yeah, you can't just make a novelist. It's more than just make you feel strange. No, and anyone can feel strange about any book. For example, I just the Three Body Problem. I was anxious throughout. And I thought it was very strange as well. I hope the TV series or movie or whatever they're doing, it's going to enlighten me a little bit, because I haven't had the courage to reread it. but I wouldn't classify it as slipstream. Strange is just not enough. Confused. I think it more is the word confused.
Yeah. It seems like a lot of people have their own interpretation of that essay in 1989 where the movement was coined. Where the term was coined. And then it's like different authors have sort of taken it in different ways, which is kind of what has happened to weird fiction as well.
Yeah, I guess.
It's hard to think. But I mean, I would take it as, hey, if you like mind-bending stuff, here are some interesting titles to read. And maybe we look them up and we find something interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah, I got nothing other than Kafka, which freaked me out recently.
I was never able to get into it. Then again, I haven't tried in English, and it's just in Portuguese. In my teens, it was all the hype, and I couldn't. Just, what the hell is this?
I just realized this based on what Susanna said about Balthazar and Blimunda. Jose, how well does 100 Years of Solitude or Love in the Time of Cholera translate into English for you? Have you read any of the novels in English and then seen whether things are lost?
I've read the... Go ahead, you probably know them. I only have one book. Yeah.
No. I was going to say why I personally wouldn't read them in English because, I'll read them in the vernacular. It's the same way that all my fantasy I read it in English because why would I read a translation? It's only when I get to the more exotic languages that I don't know what translation works best. I don't know from Japanese to English or Japanese to Spanish. I think it's pretty much dependent on whether you go somewhere decent there. But and the thing, I don't know if this gets, it does get lost in translation. Latin American Spanish and Spanish from Spain, we use the same words, but sometimes we speak a different language. Like there are sentences in 100 Years of Solitude that I don't know what they mean because you change certain nouns in a sentence, and I don't know that they're going to eat corn by the lake because it could be anything else. Like I did not understand the words they were using. So some grammatical constructions and some words make a big difference. So it's not an easy read for me, even though it's in Spanish. Some authors less issues than others. But yeah, I mean, that's about it, really. I guess. Yeah, I'm not adding much to the conversation at this point.
Do have a question for you, Jose. I think you asked this when we talked to Josh Erickson earlier. That it came up about. So magic realism is burning the lines between fantasy and reality. It refers to literature with magical or supernatural phenomena based in an otherwise real world and mundane setting. So, what's the difference between magic realism and urban fantasy?
The mindset.
I would say, for me, magic realism is not magic in the way we understand wizards and spells and, rituals, cantrips, whatever. Magic realism is like it's a real world, real life setting, but the events and the happenings are so unlikely that it's almost magic. Like, again, we go back to Love in the Time of the Cholera, which we can discuss whether it is or is not, but the fact that you got this couple whose love was frowned upon by society, and he remains faithful to her throughout all his life, albeit from the waist up. And they finally get together, like in their old age, and they finally allow their love to happen. Is that sort of, very sort of fairly whimsical, sort of romantic, sort of feel good thing
How?
about it. Sorry.
Okay, a little aside, we'll go back to magic realism in a bit. That how is that romantic? How is anything romantic in love in a time of cholera? This is a guy who wants to have his cake and eat it. Under the pretext of this love, he goes around and he sleeps with 1,000 women. At least he keeps a notebook, for crying out loud. He keeps record.
Yes.
And no, that's not love. I'm sorry. No.
Well,
I'm too busy laughing.
I hear you and I agree with you. And maybe speaks about my personality. But when I was reading the book, I was kind of thinking like, oh, I wish I had a life like that. Not.
I bet it's every man's dream.
Not a life of. No. Not a life of sleeping with 1,000 women. That gets tiring. I mean about eventually finding like your true love that you've. We'll remember that high school crush. That first crush that we had on someone, right, Steve? And can you imagine that in your old age? You had your life, you had your wife, your family, your kids. Your wife passes away, whatever, and in your old age, you rekindle that love, that first love that you had when you were 13, 14, or whatever. It's that kind of sort of magical thing about it that is quite endearing, or I found quite endearing. Obviously, we can discuss the morality of the character, but this and it's making what you can, what you're rightly pointing out as particularly creepy and not very morally or very ethically highbrow. It makes it palatable and it makes it endearing. I don't know. That's what I enjoyed about it. Yeah. Okay. Again, maybe it says something about my personality.
No, you're not the only one. I can't. I don't get it. I think that's not love at all. And I don't think there's a lot of magic realism elements in it, to be fair, compared with like 100 Years of Solitude, for example.
You're right. It's like one element. I think there's like a spectra at one point. So, but it's very, very light. 100, which is why I think 100 Years of Solitude is used as the founding, the text. I would say 100 Years of Solitude, and then Midnight's Children, and then The Famished Road. From 3 different cultures are sort of the
So 100 Years of Solitude.
Magical realism?
It's interesting because the first time I read it, I was like 14, 15 years old, and I read it in Portuguese both times. And I, not knowing what I was reading pretty much, I read it quite literally, so it didn't make sense. So my first read of the book, I wasn't in the mindset, I don't know if it was a translation or whatever, but I read stuff very literally, and I thought, wow, this doesn't make any sense. It's awful. This ending, what the hell is going on? And then later on in my 20s, I had nothing else to do. It was in a dark period of my life that I didn't have a lot of possessions, and those were the few books left. And I read it again, having read a lot since then. I already started writing and everything. So it just clicked what was going on, how all the metaphors, all the allegories, and suddenly that ending, wow, just, I was floored. It was one of those books that I just closed it and I just looked at the ceiling for about an hour, just trying to process it all. So there's that. The mindset, I think, is as important as the translation.
Yes, I've tried and failed twice. I mean, to like it, not to finish it. I did finish it, but magical realism is
like is a strong word. It's a very you almost want to kill yourself afterwards. It's the most depressing book ever. It's suddenly because I read it in a very low point in my life, and actually after reading it, I was like, okay, it could be worse. It could be much worse. No, it's just perspective.
Sometimes that works. Sometimes that works.
Yeah.
I think having the realism and the magic together just doesn't work for me. Just feels off.
Mm.
Is it fair to say that magic realism is most used in YA?
No, that's urban fantasy.
Magical realism.
You
I used
need
to-
to be mature to understand all those allegories, I think. I can't imagine a YA magic realism book. That'd be scary.
I think The Alchemist is YA magic realism, and some of the stuff that
That's
Koyo wrote, as we mentioned earlier.
esoteric self-help crap.
I mean, yes, it is suitable for. I mean, I read it as a young adult, which is very true.
Yeah,
It's a very good book.
it's a
I
very
still don't get the hate for it, but okay. I guess it's too easy.
I think it's a nice entry book for like young,
Yeah.
like teenagers to read something a
Okay,
bit more.
so I guess I'm stuck at entry level because anytime I try to level up, it's like whoop, nope. Midnight's Children is the one with because there I actually know the history. But oh my god, the circles Rushdie makes us run through in the first 100 pages. I mean, I gave up. I could not even finish it. It's oh my god.
This is
Yeah, but people who
no.
sorry?
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, I was going to say people who have read it, who have read Midnight's Children, say that it is and loved it, say that it's one of the most phenomenal books, if not the phenomenal book that they have read in their lives. Kind of, it occupies that position the way 100 Years of Solitude does for many people. Many readers, and globally, not just Spanish readers.
There's a list of YA magical realism books, and surprised to see this year on the list is The Ocean at the End of the Lane by Neil Gaiman.
It's not magical. Is it magical realism? I mean, magical realism.
I guess
is
it could
very. See, I mean, it depends on how you want to define it, but yes, in the sense of. But I think magical realism has a connection with history in terms of bringing in historical background to the slightly out there elements. And there's a sense of, I don't know how to put this, but if you read a magical realism novel, you know that it's magical realism. For me, The Ocean at the End of the Lane is very much fantasy. It's yes, you can. I can't think of a reason why I would call it magical realism. I'm not sure. I mean, this is after my Latin American reading project. I would have said yes to this, that magical realism and fantasy. Why is the term? But now I feel it has a historical connection with the development of literature in Latin America and the boom. So I would hesitate to call ocean magical realism now, but this is me being nitpicky. Maybe I think it's wise to hear others' opinions as well.
What about? So we are talking about English and Spanish and Portuguese and all that. Is there any books in India that explore these themes or that play with the narrative in this way that we don't know about? Because
Would Life of Pi and Q&A be magical realism?
Life of Pi, sure. It's a very weird book. I really like the book. Yes. Why not?
And Q&A?
But again, if you want to be very, very pedantic about it, and if you want to reserve the term magical realism for that phenomenon in Latin American literature, which has then gone global, then no, but otherwise, yes.
And
In the definition that Steve read out, yes.
I would say that Q&A is magical realism. And for those unaware, Q&A is the book that was turned into the movie Slumdog Millionaire. So the original title of the book was Q&A. And, it's that, kid from a, destitute background that through his different experiences in life is capable of, beating the Indian version of Who Wants to Be a Millionaire. And it's a sort of impossibility of odds that makes it almost magical, maybe.
Interesting.
Steve is
I was
shaking.
not connecting what Q&A is.
It is the original title of the book.
It is not a very well-liked novel here.
Is it not? Go on.
No,
Why
not
not?
at all.
Why not?
What happens
I enjoyed the novel.
I haven't even read it, so I'm not going to say anything about it, but it is not well liked in the sense I have never seen it on bookshelves, on local bookshelves here. I just looked it up. My guess is it is a depiction of India because I just looked up the author. He was a foreign secretary, which means that most of his postings would have been in other nations. Might be a depiction. It might be that thing that when when non-resident Indians write Indian novels, they just sometimes feel a bit off. I have read novels like that, and of course they write in English language. Many of them are resident in America. Something is just very, very off, and it doesn't work. So, but again, I have not read the book, so I don't know. Maybe it's very good, but
good old prejudice.
Seen it discussed, talked.
Sounds like good old prejudice there, in the same way as when Hollywood tries to depict Spain in the movies or something like that. But
it could be. I was not a very big fan of the movie. The childhood parts were very good, but when they grew up, I think the childhood parts were excellent. The early questions were excellent. But then it became a bit cliche, honestly. But what was the fantastical element, Jose? I mean, in the book, I'm asking.
No, there's no fantastical.
Okay.
Well, I suppose the fantastical element would be, this chain of events in his life that led him to be able to know, he just related every question to something that he had lived in his life, which it's almost magic.
And we were worried we wouldn't have anything to talk about.
Well, to be honest, we've completely digressed into magical realism from the first 20 minutes of a Slipstream.
But we knew that was going to happen.
Yeah,
we knew. That was inevitable.
The Seven Moons of Mali Almeida is a great book. It's the only book which has magical realism as one of the labels that I loved. Read it. It won the 2022 Booker.
Yeah, the thing about Slipstream is that it is so niche. And I don't think it actually maybe hasn't defined itself yet properly. It still is trying to find its way. I mean, for me, it needs to have those fantastical elements, a little bit of sci-fi, the metaphysical aspects, lots of allegories and humor and just a lot of introspection and a good puzzle to solve. That's it.
It just clicked on me, and I haven't read it, but I suspect, and it's on my TBR at some point, maybe in the next few years, the comic book, The Inkle by Jodorowsky, that's got to be Slipstream.
I never
The what?
heard
Sorry.
of-
The Inkle, which is it's the comic that kind of influenced the Fifth Element movie.
Oh. Well, comics, I don't know. But like, okay, just say, so you read a little bit of Oublié, right? And you DNF'd, and that's fine. Because, as you told me, you you were in this, sci-fi environment, right? What you thought it was, kind of.
Yes.
And then you encountered a dwarf, and the whole world collapsed.
There was too much going on for me. My mind couldn't cope with everything. It was everything. You threw the kitchen sink at me. I didn't know if I was reading fantasy, mythology, gods, sci-fi. There was too many things going on, and it's like I said at the very beginning. It was mental gymnastics. I couldn't handle everything that was happening there. Sorry, I never wanted to have this conversation, Susanna. I do apologize. It was too much for me.
No, but you are a perfect example. I was laughing when I got your email, and I was like, and then there was a dwarf, and it's like, yeah, that's perfectly fine. Just was too much. I was laughing. I said, okay, so Jose is not my audience, but it helps me understand. I always said, and I said this to Paramita as well. Even if you don't read it, even if you stop, just tell me where you stopped, and that helps me figure it out.
I think
how to kind of
I don't know,
work things around.
But maybe I've got the books I tend to not engage with, and I hardly ever DNF, is where I get thrown straight into the action without getting a bit of a background on who the characters are and what motivates them and why they do the things they do. And I think your book did that. We had these two siblings that straight off away they went, and these people joined them, and then everything else that you put around them. And I couldn't cope. I found it really, really difficult understanding the world. I didn't know where I was. I think
that
sometimes when we jump into a fantasy book, you sort of you don't know the world, but it's familiar. Medieval European fantasy setting. Okay, I sort of know where I am. Or if you do Discworld, you eventually get there. Or if you do, I don't know, whatever you call it, sci-fi, Star Wars, space operas, you sort of know. But with yours, I didn't know. It was nothing like nothing I've read before.
But that was exactly what I was going for. So I was very happy with your feedback.
Yeah, I mean, if your aim, and I don't put it past you, was to make me feel inadequate, success, bullseye. Yeah.
No, not at all. But I don't know.
And then there was a dwarf, but you made it through Wheel of Time.
Let's not go there. Let's not bring it up every week. Come on. Let's give it a break. No, but check out the Inkle. It's on my TBR, and I think it would be a good.
Yeah, I found it. I mean, I found the book. It looks interesting.
It looks pretty Slipstreamy to me. And I just made the connection now. So
I was trying to see if there was a version that was not in comic form, so I could read it.
No.
Novel.
The Inkle is.
So that's.
Yeah.
That's sad.
It's in the vein of the heavy metal magazine from the 80s in France. It's that kind of real exploration of the comic as a medium. And you've got the script is by Jodorowsky, and the art is amazing by Mobius.
What a lovely name. I mean, that's the first thing which I was like, Mobius, and I was like, Mobius strip. So nice.
Well,
Art by John Giraud.
Yeah.
Mobius. It's his pseudonym, but it's a very nice pseudonym.
Yeah, the funny thing about Jean Giraud is that he did like classic Western comics, and he signed those under his real name, and all the sci-fi weird stuff he did under the Mobius pen name.
The art is very, very nice. I mean, there are few images here on this book, on this thing I'm saying. It's weird. It's I don't know whether it's Slipstream, but it's definitely weird.
Yeah,
Humanoids. Interesting.
I'm here thinking of a little slogan for my marketing efforts. It's not finished yet, but if all I ask from my readers is that they put just a little, just a fraction of the effort they put into deciphering Malazan, if they put into my work, that's all I ask. And it's a fraction of the pages. I need to work that into some sort of marketing slogan.
Malazan for idiots. I don't know.
Yeah,
Malazan
for dummies. You can do
Malazan for dummies.
if you can't read Malazan, you can read timelessness. Come on, maybe that's going to be my slogan.
Yeah.
It'd be a good blurb.
Yeah. Probably get sued.
I guess if you mention Malazan, I mean, it will catch people's attention. That's all I can say. Except weird people like me who will be like, "What, Mala? Run in the other direction." Anything gets compared to that series now, I just put it on my anti-TBR. I can't do it anymore. Oh my God.
Everything is compared to
I
it,
will
though.
need to read it first to be sure that it would fit. But it's just the effort that people put into trying to decipher every little thing, just a little bit of that effort in my books that are just a third of the pages long. You'll be fine. You'll have a lot of fun. So.
The time always flies whenever we do these. And we were talking before about kind of like what are we going to talk about, and we had all these other ideas to kind of fill the time, and here we are almost 2 hours later. And we didn't go off topic too much. I thought we did pretty good.
So final
we stayed
question.
in the realms of the weird, I think.
Sorry for taking over, but is everyone wiser? Is everyone a bit more clued on after this conversation than at the beginning?
Yeah.
Well, I had
I learned
3
a lot.
books, 3 new books on my TBR, so that's always good. I
got some book recs.
Yeah, it's always good.
And I thought we could end on a very nice, hopeful note, which Susanna said, because she said that Slipstream is almost a term which needs to define itself. And we mentioned 2 books a lot, one which by Jose and one which I think all of you have read is House of Leaves. And like when Gabriel García Márquez wrote 100 Years of Solitude, he didn't write it saying, "Hey, I'm going to invent magical realism." Mm-hmm. He wrote it, and then there was academic discourse built around it, and people were inspired that this could be possible in a novel. And I mean, he transformed the face of literature, not just Latin American literature. Mm-hmm. When Mark Danielewski published House of Leaves, it was path-breaking, and whether it was a gimmick or whether it was something truly transcendental is up to the reader. But it was new, and it changed what could be done with literature. So I almost feel like we can end on a hopeful note that we don't know who is out there, and maybe even the person is there on this panel, we don't know. But might be someone out there writing the definitive work of Slipstream literature somewhere, and maybe when it is fully out there and when it gains readership and appreciation, then discourse around Slipstream will become easier, as it is for magical realism or ergodic literature like House of Leaves.
Mm-hmm.
I found the conversation inspirational in that sense.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I like that idea. If you're out there listening,
Let's
get
go
in
out.
touch. Yeah, it's nice.
And a hopeful, but how often do we end on a hopeful note though? That's weird.
That's true.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's good.
after
See,
last
the
week.
emotional payoff, after the mental exercise.
Aye, there you go.
That's all it's
There
about.
you go.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. It's yeah. I learned a lot. I didn't know really a whole lot about Slipstream before, and feel like I understand a little bit more now.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I never clocked that House of Leaves. Not House of Leaves, god damn it. Cloud Atlas was that. But then, God, the genre is so wide because Cloud Atlas and Susanna's works are nothing alike. So,
True. Structure-wise and theme-wise, yeah. No, and
yeah.
prose-wise, yeah, no, nothing alike. Do not compare me to David Mitchell.
No, but like,
It's
I
not
mean,
fair.
setting, structure, everything. It's
Yeah, that's the mythology aspect of it. Because I had to add an extra layer and then just, make it mythological. Just because.
It's a very broad net.
Mm-hmm.
Well, cool.
Well,
Yeah.
thank
Do
you
you
so
feel
much
enlightened, Jose?
Do I feel enlightened?
Do you feel like you learned something?
Yeah, but I always feel like I make a fool of myself in these conversations. Maybe I'm thinking now I shouldn't have joined. I should have just listened to the podcast and so I would say to my students, it's always better to keep your mouth shut and let people think you're stupid than to open your mouth and confirm expectations. Yeah, no, definitely. These conversations are always edifying. But I don't know if I would like to have, Steve, you've got long reach. If we could get someone from an academic background to get. So I suppose I'm looking for free lectures on literature or something like that. I don't know, but you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Something.
Yeah.
I suppose, isn't Layla some sort of scholar of sorts?
Professor. Yeah. She's yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, I'm sure we can figure something out.
Mm-hmm.
I think that would be nice. Literature genres 101 in 2 hours. All you ever needed to know.
Yeah, that would be awesome.
I'm reading the OG literature novel, so if if I finish it, then I can deliver a 5-minute talk on and help everyone fall asleep. I volunteer to do that.
Nice. That's a problem. Yeah, we're gonna hold you to that then.
Yeah.
Uh-oh.
Yeah, you got yourself in trouble now.
Yeah, exactly.
But so yeah, it was fun. It was a good one. Yeah, it was a lot of fun. So until next time, Susanna, where can people find you and your work?
I can be found on X and at 10 of the Weird on YouTube. On X, I'm on as a chronodendron, but if you Google me, you'll find me. And my books can be found anywhere. The series is named Timelessness. First book is Weird Gods. You can't miss it. And I have a new standalone novel coming up next March called Oublié.
Available for pre-order now.
Yes,
Get it?
yes.
Yes. And Paramita, where can people find you and argue with you about literature?
So I'm available on the Page Chewing forum, which are hosted by Steve, who is also the host of this podcast. And I'm there quite regularly.
Every once in a while. And Jose, where can people find you?
Mostly my YouTube channel, Jose's Amazing Worlds, and also in the pagechewing.com forums.
Nice. I can also be found there. It's the best place to find me. So come and say hello and lecture us on literature if you're brave enough.
Please.
Yes.
Mhm.
So everyone have a great weekend, and we'll talk soon.
Bye.